Hey guys, in this lesson we are going to be going over how to create a pumpkin using a very basic shapes and then using just texture brushes to create our shadows and our depth and whatnot to really bring it to life. So as a quick example, you will see that if I turn these off, I am working with a basic shape before and after, and this is what we're going to be doing together today. It's great for fall, but also great for literally any object, anytime. I'm Peggy Dean. I am an illustrator, educator, author. You can find all the freebies and tutorials all the time at thepigeonletters.com. So let's jump into the lesson. First of all, my cat has decided to join us. What I want to point out is that I am using a custom color palette here that I've created that you are more than welcome to snag yourself. The link is in the text. So the first thing that I want to do is the brush set that I'm using is by Lisa Glanz, and it's her Texturific pack. And this brush pack I love. You guys know this about me by now if you've been following me for a little while, is that I love a good texture brush on Procreate. And Lisa has delivered. Her brush pack includes 2 brush sets. One of them is for brushes that you can use, some texture, some more refined for shape and edges and whatnot. And the other one is stamps. Nothing but stamps. So you can use these large or small, however you want to. So that's a really awesome bonus. If you want to grab that, it's also in the text. You can use any brush that you want to. I'm just going to be using this set, which is why I wanted to introduce it to you. So I'm going into the, I renamed hers. I think that they're just called texture brushes and texture stamps, but I wanted to make sure I knew it was by Lisa. Quicker access for me because I will forget otherwise. So I'm using Lisa's pencil, and what you want to do is just kind of, I'm going to use this orange color to do a quick draft of my pumpkin. So I'm not using a photo reference. I'm just kind of going by my memory. Things to think about with pumpkins though, identifying features. You might see one that is more, oblong and tall. You might see one that's kind of short and wide. You might like the perfect circle ones. So that's something to think about as you're doing your shape. And that's the first thing that I draw is the outer lines here. So that's what mine's gonna look like. From here, I'm just gonna create a little dip in like so. And this is just your draft, so it doesn't have to be perfect. And then just the bottom where it curves and meets. And that's about it. And then from here, I know that I'm gonna have something to think about though, when you are adding like those indents on the sides is they're going with the shape, with the curve. So if you think about that, if you're looking at a 3D object and making it 2D, which is what we're doing, well, we're not actually looking at it, but in our minds, you know that these edges, our curves are going to be outward like this. But as it gets closer and closer to us, they're going to become less and less curved because they are kind of like in our vision. So they're going to be more straight, basically. So less and less curved. Otherwise, it would look really funky if it was like this the whole time, because then it's like, well, where's the front? So that should be helpful. Once I have this down, I'm going to make it all kind of the same depth with the line work so that it's all the same, because I'm going to decrease the opacity and use this as a guide. So doing that, I probably should have done it in a different color because I'm going to end up doing this color on top, but it's okay. So I'm going to decrease the opacity quite a bit. So I only want to see the top here. And then I'm going to draw on top of that. So you could also draw below it. And the reason why I might end up making this on top eventually is so that I can see these lines that I put in if you need that as a reference. So I'm decreasing the opacity, creating a new layer by going to my layers panel and selecting the plus sign. I'm on my new layer. So from here, I'm actually going to use the same brush. I really like when I make it larger. Again, that's the Lisa's pencil. It has this really beautiful, gritty, grainy edge to it. So there's also butter knife, which is nice, and it's a little bit more of like this speckle inside, so it's really just your personal preference. I like things to be even more gritty, so we're gonna go with this. So I'm just gonna follow that line that I made, initially. And if it's a little bit wider, whatever, I'll just make it work and make it intentional. It's just, you know, our draft is a guide. We're not going for perfection here. Okay, and then from here, I can fill it in completely with the brush that I'm using, which is what I'm gonna do because I like this texture that it creates. But what you can also do, since we will be adding more texture later, is you can just fill it by dragging the color and dropping it. Something to make a quick note on is, do you see that how the edges are showing? Like right here, there's like a white space along the edge. Yeah, you'll see some texture, but there's also that white line. To prevent that, you'll see color drop. You'll see this threshold. So if I drag this up higher, it'll get rid of that weird white line. The threshold works differently in different circumstances, and you'll know what I mean the more you get into your workflow, but that's just a nice thing to note. But again, I'm just gonna go through here really quickly and I'm gonna color. One of the things, so I wanna just mention while I'm coloring this in, and I found it to be kind of interesting, was I was really anti like screen protectors on the iPad for a long time. Not for any particular reason other than I just liked the resolution that it gave me and I didn't want to mess with it. I guess that's a good particular reason. But I had questions about the paper-like, and I had purchased it a long time ago, but I hadn't put it on yet. And I put it on just so that I could answer those questions. And I was like, you know, I don't like it. I don't like it because of, you know, it takes away a little bit of the clarity, whatever. And I mean, you have to like really look to see that. And to be honest, like I didn't take it off after that because I'm like, I want to give it a fair chance. And it makes coloring stuff like this so fun. I'm not taking it off. I've fallen in love with it. I have bubbles like crazy on it because I didn't put it on right because I just wanted to see real quick. But I don't care and I love it. So it's staying. It is staying. Okay, just a fun FYI, paper-like matte protector. So once that's done, I can add some depth. I'm basically just creating a shape, and I made the longer way because of course you can just fill it and you don't have to use a texture brush for this. But now is when I am wanting you guys to use texture, and that is for when we add like highlights and shadows and whatnot. So this is where I do need this layer to come on top, and because it's the same color, I'm actually going to turn the layer off so I can increase the opacity, and then I'm going to change the color to something that really stands out, like how about this lime green. Okay, so now I can really see what's going on. I'm going to make it larger so it actually fits the size of my pumpkin, and I'm going to use this as kind of a reference point of where I'm going to put my shadows and whatnot. So I'm going to go back to the color I was on, which is this orange. You'll see it in your history. You can also use one finger and tap, and it'll snag whatever color that you were on, or whatever color you're on top of. And I'm gonna make that lighter or darker. Now I could also use colors from my palette here, so I'd probably use this one, but I just wanna show you in case you haven't downloaded this color palette yet. It is free, again, on my website at thepigeonletters.com/freebies. But I'm just going to increase it to make it lighter. You'll see the color it's currently on and the color it's going to. And I'm going to change my brush. So I'm going to try here. Either I like the smoky shader and the powder, but we'll do smoky shader first, and then we will, let's see. Oh wait, that's why. I'm going to go to the layer that I want to actually work on. I'm going to select this plus sign, and then I'm going to select the layer and say clipping mask. And what that's going to do is make it so it only affects the layer beneath it and no other areas. So while I see white right here, that's actually the background, because the layer beneath the clipping mask is only this orange part. So I want to see how I'm going to add, I'm going to turn this off actually for a minute so you can see what I'm doing. How I add, I'm just really lightly going through here and adding some highlight. And this is pretty similar to the color that I'm working with. This will provide a good base, but it's not going to show up. So what I'll do is make it more extreme for the sake of this tutorial. I'm actually, so that to help out, I'm going to start with a darker color first to add some depth. And the reason why is because that's where these indents are going to be. So I'm going to, you could use your guide, you could turn that on, or you could do the same thing where you just kind of eyeball it. And don't worry about going outside the lines because your clipping mask is on. So it's only going to affect that orange layer. Okay, so I turn that off. I see where that depth is. Now I want to really enhance that. So what I'm going to do is maybe go in one more time with the darker color, and don't worry about it looking like super intense with depth, because we're just going to build and build on this. Okay, so now I'm going to make an even darker color, and I'm going to decrease my brush size pretty small and just very carefully put in the center-ish of this area that like final indent depth part. And now I can work on building that. So I'm going to go maybe to that color I was just on, or lighter, just a little bit lighter, make my brush bigger. And now what you'll know is this is where it indents. And so both sides here are going to be darker. So I can make this even larger and just kind of trace that line. And see, when I'm making it darker now, because it fades in by having that like outer part and the inner part that's even darker, what it's doing is it's creating depth overall, like a gradual shadow almost. That one's a little too much. And we're just going to build this out, so there's not going to be these hard lines, because we're going to be merging like the depth in with the highlights. Okay, so we have that done. And now you can build and build and build on this, which we probably will, but I want to switch to the highlight now so that we can gradually blend these together. So I'm going to my layers panel, new layer. I'm going to apply another clipping mask. Because the clipping mask right here is already clipped, it will skip that one and clip to the same layer. So I'm going to select that lighter color, and now I'm going to come in and just in the center here, I'm going to go a lot lighter than that. Just in the center, I'm going to create that highlight, and then with different ranges of this orange, they are going to connect together. There's not going to be a solid thin line like there was on the depth part, because there's not like a crease on the outside. This is like that billowy, not billowy, but the solid part that, you know, comes out toward us. Okay, so now this is pretty light, so I'm gonna grab the color, where was it? I'm gonna grab that orange and make that kind of a medium tone, and now I'm just gonna go over everything that I did. Everything. And this is going to kind of bring those aspects together some more. And overlap everything so that it's not as harsh. But now I want to do that again. Oops. And just make that nice and large, and I'm just going to go over it all in one. Okay, so now you can see what's really standing out and what's not. And so we want to add more depth, we might want to add more highlight, and so basically you just want to build this until it's starting to look like you want it to. So what I like to do, I'm going to take this powder brush now, and I'm going to add that depth in here. And one of the things that I'll probably do is I'm going to take the layer on top of that, select this N, which is, it's blending modes, but I'm just going to focus on opacity and knock that opacity down. So it's still doing the effect, but it's not taking away from the underneath as much. So you'll see now I'm taking that shadow and I'm blending it out more. So because it's focused on the left side of this line, it's essentially making it so this part right here the light source would be coming from this direction because this part's lighter and this part's darker. I will have some depth right here, but I'm not going to have as much as this side. So basically, that's also showing the light sources coming from that direction. And then I want to fade it into the center. And then if that light source is coming from here, I might want to, here's a fun trick. You can, if you want to erase some of this or you did too much of it, hold down on your eraser and it'll select the same brush that you're on so that you can just go over it and undo something without having to like restart a layer or something. Okay, so this part's not going to be as full of depth necessarily on the lines as much as it is in this general area, because this is where my light source is coming from. So I'm kind of going over this whole bottom section and then the side with some depth. So you can see that kind of building up now, but I'm also paying attention to each crease. So it's kind of like a dual act, if you will, of figuring out where I want that to go. So when I shrink it, you can see that it's really coming together. I'm going to make this even darker and just do the same thing, smaller, smaller, and then I'll make it big right here. I'm not going up as high with the darker color because I want that gradual fade of the depth. And then I'll keep some more on the bottom here. And adding this texture to the bottom shows that it's got some gravity. Okay, now I'm going to do the opposite and I'm going to do it with the highlight. So I'm going to grab my orange, make it a little bit lighter, and add the highlight on the top left and also on the top, and then come in and start blending those together. Okay, so now I have this, and as you work on this, I'll tell you, every time I do this type of project, I'm always like, gosh, that does not look like what I want it to, but I promise you, just get up and do something and come back, and you're going to be like, oh, no, that totally is working out the way that I want it to. I also want to mention, I know I'm working on the clipping masks incorrectly. It's because I got on a roll. Ideally, though, you would keep the layers separate, so like your depth layer would be separate from your light layer, but I went a little bit crazy. And that's normal once you get into your workflow, but the idea is to work indestructively so that you can change anything like on separate elements as they come. So you can make this lighter, like I'm going to create a different clipping mask layer. So you can go even lighter with your highlights. It depends on, whoops, clipping mask. It depends on how much you want to emphasize like light. And I could even go lighter than that, just in a little bit of the area. So see how, yeah, there's a lighter area, but then just in certain parts of it, is it like highlighted. I'm going to turn that down so it's not as intense, the opacity. And then I have this awesome looking pumpkin. So now I can add like a stem to it. I can add, I'll get rid of my guide layer because I don't need it anymore. And then, so I'll show you how to do that. I'm going to select my plus symbol. I'm going to go back to Lisa's pencil and I'm going to select a brown. So I like this one. It's a nice neutral brown. And I'm going to create kind of like the top area right here and just fill that in. I don't necessarily need to even add texture to that part because it has its own texture with this awesome brush, but I could if I wanted to. It's a little further down than I want it to be though, because this is not necessarily from this. There we go. Okay. So see, I didn't really do much to make that. I just wanted some imperfect looking base. And then I'm going to come up and I'm coming up higher on one side. And then I'm just creating a jagged edge for the stem and then coloring that in. And you can make this thinner or thicker, just depending on what you want. I like that better. And then I can create the same idea where I add a layer, make a clipping mask, go to my color wheel, either select a lighter brown like this one, or you can move it you know, just from the color that you're on to make it lighter. I'll try, let's do soft dough. I just like to experiment with brushes. Make this a clipping mask. Oh, also, don't worry if you start, you know, let's say you make like the best mark in the world, like right here, but then it didn't work out. You can also just go in and make a clipping mask after the fact. So, just a little tip. I'll make that even lighter and go smaller. That's a little too yellow. So I'll actually select the brown I was on and just drag it up so it's lighter. There we go. And I'll just do that toward the top here. And then I'll add some depth. So select a dark brown and have some depth just on one side. So see how that totally changes everything and just makes it look a lot more, you know, a lot more fun. Like if I turn that off, it's just this flat image, which is also really fun. But when you add that texture and you add that depth, it really brings it to life a little bit more. Lastly, I'm going to add some leaves, so I'm going to select a new layer. I like to work in new layers, especially when it's different sections of something. I will select a green, just a nice neutral green, go back to Lisa's pencil, make this pretty small because I'm going to have it kind of surrounding and then coming off here. And pumpkin leaves, I don't even know what they really look like, but I'm just making it, you know, it's imperfect. I'm not making it look like anything spectacular. I might do just one more coming off, and I like to make them, you know, have some more character. I might have this one actually there. Just something small. But I've even done pumpkin illustrations that actually go like all the way down, and they're like dragging, because you've probably been to a pumpkin. If you've been to a pumpkin patch, then you know that that's kind of how it works. Right here, I want to this time decrease the saturation so that it's not so green. So I'm going to bring my brush down like this on the color wheel and then create a clipping mask and then go to, let's try greasy eraser and just, whoops. Oh, it looks like that is, I haven't used this one brush yet, but look at how it's creating the saturation with pressure, but then it also kind of adds eraser. I love that. I'm actually going to leave it as is. I really like the way that looks. But that wasn't my point. So I'll try the greasy sponge. Okay, so then I'll go in and just kind of add that saturation grit. You can't really tell because it's the vine, but you get the idea. And then I'm going to go up and just grab... we'll grab the smoky shader again and just bring it in the top part, or the bottom part, I guess, of the leaf to kind of show some separation in the middle. Oops, I accidentally undid it. So I'm just going to the middle part of it so that it shows some depth there. Okay, and that's it. And then I have my pumpkin. Of course, I can add to it if I want to. I can make some more depth areas, or I can make it lighter. But I can make this whole thing a whole pumpkin patch if I wanted to. So I love doing illustrations like this. Again, this brush pack is amazing. I didn't even show you half of these textures. Like you could do a light dusting, and then I'll show you what that looks like here. Let's see, new layer. So look at, like, there's just the best textures. If you wanted to do a background, here's my kitty. Move, honey. I could create a new layer, drag it, drag it underneath everything. Oh, she really wants to play. And then maybe make a complementary color or have something, you know, along the lines of what I'm working with. So I'll choose this kind of like light olivey green, and you can just put some background in here and it looks awesome. So these texture brushes are good. And then the coffee granules I love because it's like kind of the same thing, but you can kind of pick and choose where to like emphasize. So I'll undo that and show you. So if I make that larger, see how it's just adding like a little bit. So I could use that all over, but I really like to do it where you use like, whoops, where is it? Sprinkles, and then make it darker, and then go in and just kind of, whoops. See how it's just adding just a little bit? I just think that's so fun to add that texture. And anyway, okay, I could do that all day. I hope this was helpful. Be sure to grab the color palette. It's free on my website. Grab this brush pack. And if this is helpful, please subscribe and turn notifications on, because I've got a lot of great tips for you guys all the time. Head over to thepigeonletters.com as well to get weekly tutorials such as this, and I will see you next time.